So we now are discussing about the HTML introduction. We already reached one section about the special characters. So yesterday we were discussing about the special characters, and there are special characters that might be uh, good information for you to build a website. Let's say if you need to put your copyright symbol. So if you have this symbol, yeah, you need to write like this HTML entity. And if you need to write the registered trademark sign like this part, so yeah, you need to have like this HTML entity and so on. Yeah, you don't need to memorize this one because maybe in some parts, yeah, it is uh, necessary for you to use and it's necessary for you to know about this one. For example, the symbol LT or less than and then greater than. Maybe you need to write this one. And it starts with the symbol N like this one and then ends with the semicolon. There are still many special characters. This is only some of the special characters. You can have a lot of foreign you can have a lot of characters like the foreign characters or the Japanese characters, Chinese characters. Yeah, there are so many characters in the world, and they have their own specific HTML entity. If you want to know more about this HTML entity, of course you need to find what is the proper entity for your web purpose. Now let's see this one. When you look at the code, it seems is difficult to understand because all the codes are about the HTML entity. So you can try. So let me save this file. Okay, it might be difficult to see the result, and it's very challenging to recognize the characters. But here you can see GT, it is greater than, GT greater than, and NBSP. NBSP is, yeah, this is non-breaking space. So you can take a look on this example, and let's say I would like to run it. Yeah, you can see this kind of information. Okay. Yeah, these are some of the special characters that you can build using the HTML. When we write text or paragraph in the HTML, we can see more details with div and span. Div and span, we got it is as a block or the inline elements. The block elements means we can add a line break before and after them. Div is a block element, and the other block elements are related to heading, related to list, paragraph, okay. And we are going to learn later about table. And then HR, its rule. So those are the block elements. After we have some statements or some text, then we will go to the next slide, or we can have something before that line. It is different from the block element. The inline elements do not break the text before and after. So span is one of the inline element. The other inline element is A. You know already, A is to give a hyperlink. The hyperlink, you know already, it can be the external hyperlink using the HTTP. You can use the HTML file as the hyperlink, or you can use section as the hyperlink. Div. You will see a lot of div in the recent HTML files because they split each section with div. We call div, it's a logical division within a page. The block style element, this will create the block style because we can say like this one, this example, so it will be created in the div, in the division. And we can create this div using CSS. I will not explain the detail on the CSS, but maybe we can have some sense only about this CSS. For example, I have this div style. Let me just save this pen.html. Okay. We have division, and after we have the div, we have P, and we have the additional inline element, which is span. Now you can take a look. In the div, we have style, and this style is about how we want to make it fancy in the HTML file. The font size is 24 pixels, and then the color is red. And we want to put the text in the center. And the text is div example. Okay, you can have many properties for the style, but for now, let's just use the font and the color. And then in the paragraph, I would like to put text like this one is blah, blah, blah. But in the middle of the text, I would like to make more stylish or maybe more fancy text. So in this case, I would like to change the style into red color, and then the font will be in the bold. So this text is in the span, but this text is not in span. If you run, you can see for this one, it is in the center of the web. And the other statement, which is about the span, you can see only a text. It is the text inside the span. It has been changed to red and bold, but the other text has no effect for span. So this is what we call as the inline, and this is what we call as the block statement. Okay. So in the inline, you can define something in the between of the text. Either it is in the paragraph or either it is in the division div. And the span, we call this is the inline style element. It is useful for modifying a specific portion of text. And it do not create a separate area of paragraph in the document. So it is very useful whenever we have the style. If you want to make a good style of your web page, then you can arrange with span and also combine with the CSS. So yeah, this is another, I think this is the same. This is almost similar with this one. If you want to include this one into this, okay, this is the same. And let's see. It will affect only the word in the span. So it does not affect to the other word. So that's the div and span. Now we are entering a new chapter, which is about tables. Because we are in the Department of Industrial and Management Engineering, and the program that we are focusing on is about the data analytics. So we will manage a lot of kind of data, and the data will be in the form of tables. So that's why we need to know what is table and how can we create table in the HTML. I think most of you know how what is table, but let me just introduce how we can create tables in the HTML. The HTML has tables that represent the tabular data. And a table consists of one or several rows. And every row or each row has one or more columns. So the structure will be, first, we need to have table. And after we have table, next, we need to define the row. After we have row, we need to define the TD or tabular data, and we call it cell. Tables should not be used for layout, and you can use CSS floats and positioning styles instead. For this course, I will not focusing on the CSS. We can just learn how to create tables. If you have interest on making a good tables, there are many good tables in the internet, and you can just reuse the CSS. So there are three things that you need to understand from the table. The first is to create the table based on the tag of table. And then you need to make row using tr. After you have tr, you need to make a cell in a row using td. Let's see. I don't have the PPT GIF. I don't have the zip GIF, but let's assume that we have this one. Okay, so the image does not appear here in the web because we don't have that image. Yeah, if you want to input the image, you can put it later. Okay. Now we have like the lecture 1, we have the lecture 2, and we have the lecture 2 demos. If you see this one, it seems it is not a table because we cannot see the line. Okay. But it is a table since the structure, okay, the structure starts with table. You can see this one. The structure now starts with table, and we have TR to indicate the row. We have 1, 2, 3. We have 3 rows, and then we have 1, 2. We have 2 columns. So when you want to create the tables, yeah, this is an example to create a table. First, you need to define the table. You have the table, and the table has the ending of the HTML tag. And then you need to define the row. After you row the rows, you need to define how many columns you want to specify in that particular row. In the first row, we have the TD, and we want to input the image, and the image is the ppt.gif. The second cell or the second column, I would like to include the lecture1.ppt. This is a reference, and you can see now, yeah, it's very unique. It is a file. Okay. As we learned before, the href or the hyperlink reference, it can be an HTTP, or it can be one HTML file, or it can be a section in the same file. But now you can refer to one of any file like PowerPoint or Word file or PDF file. It is also possible. Because I don't have the file in this computer, so you can just refer to this name. And when you want to download this file, you need a server. Because now we don't have any server, it is only the HTML file. We cannot upload this one, and we cannot download in our computer. If your computer has the server, yeah, we will learn later. By the time we will know how we can upload this one into the server, and then how we want to download this file. So we have the first row, and this is the second row. We have also the ppt.gif, and we have another file, which is lecture 2. And the last row is a zip file. We put the file image zip.gif, and then we also include the zip file here. If the user want to get the file, they can access by clicking this one. Yeah, now it is not possible because we don't have that file. Oh, sorry, I put double on this slide. Okay, so if you take a look on this example, yeah, you will get the result, something like this one. Actually, I want to put this GIF symbol. If you can have the GIF, yeah, you can get this symbol for your later downloading a file from your website. In order to make a complete HTML, we can split the table into 3 different parts. The table is similar with the whole concept of HTML. In the HTML, we have the HTML, we have head, body. Now the table also has header and body and footer. So the T head, it denotes the table header and it contains the TH element. You know, when we create any kind of data, there should be the header. What is the name of the column? Okay. So the column name is the header, and we can define with the TH. If we have the data, then it should be the TD. T body denotes the collection of table rows that contain the query data. Maybe I make this one. This is what it contains every data. So all the data will be in the T body. And the T foot, we want to make the table footer. What comes before the T body? So we will see with examples. And we can have the column group and column to define the columns. Most often used to set the column width. Yeah, if we take a look on this example, we have a table and the border equals to 1. So there will be a border of the table. And we have the column group. We have the header. The header here, we want to specify in one row, and there will be column 1 and column 2. TH means header. And then we want to specify the footer. The footer contains one row and it represents in for every column. So this is the footer 1 and this is the footer 2. In the body, we have two rows, TR and TR. So we have 1, 2. Okay, we have two columns. 1 and 2. So we have two columns in the body. When you specify in your HTML file, you need to specify the head first, and you need to specify foot. Okay? Not the body first, but foot first, and then finally you can define the body. The last comes the body or the data. We have the TH, and this represents the columns. How you want to have the column properties like the style, or maybe you have the color and etc. So let's see. Okay, let me make a table example 2. Now you can see the table in very clean and clear format. You can see the border. And you can see this is the header of column 1. This is the header of the column 2. This is the footer of the column 1. And this is the footer column 2. This kind of footer, it can be useful if you make a kind of information about sales, for example. You have sales in the column 2, and I want to know the total sales in one column. So that can be a footer. although the footer is before the data in the code, it is displayed last. Okay, here you define the foot before the body, but the result will be at the end of the table. And by the default, header text is bold and center. So we cannot change by ourselves. It is already determined by the table that for the header, the text will be bold and center. With regard to the programming languages, okay, so and any programming languages, we can define nested. So there can be like nested condition or nested loops. In the tables, there is also a nested table. So the table data, or we call it cell, can contain nested tables. It means tables within tables. So there is a table inside a table. Let's suppose we have a table like this, and we create one row. In this row, we have we have two cells, and in the second cells, we want to include another table. In this case, yeah, it is the personal information. The first is I want to get any context. This is the first cell, and the second cell is to show the first name and the last name. Maybe the color is not same. Oh, okay. And yeah, there is no red color like in the PowerPoint, but the idea is the first name and the last name is a table, and the contact first name and last name is the external table. So you can build a table inside a table. When you look at the code, okay, here you can see the cell spacing and cell padding. The cell spacing is 0 and cell padding is 5. So what does it mean by this cell spacing and cell padding? We can take a look on this picture. This is two important attributes for table. We want to check the cell spacing. Cell spacing means we want to see the space between the cell. We want to see, we want to define how many space that should be in between the cell. Cell padding means we want to know the empty space around the cell itself. If we can clarify the empty space around the cell, means the cell will be bigger maybe, but the space between the cells may be smaller. So this is like one can get bigger and the other can get smaller. Of course, you can check your monitor size. If your monitor size is big enough, then it does not matter about the cell spacing and the cell padding. So let's take a look at this one. if we have the table cell, okay, you can see how the difference between the cell padding and the cell spacing. In the first part, the cell spacing is high, but the cell padding is 0. And the other table shows that the cell spacing is 0 and the cell padding is high, which is 10. We still use border 1 to make the line. Okay, so this example shows the color, but I don't use color. If you see with the colors, I guess it is more obvious the difference how the cell padding and cell spacing works. In the previous example, although you have the even though you have the cell spacing and cell padding here, you cannot see because we do not write the borderline. So it's not clear what is the cell padding and cell spacing here. Now there will be some kind of unique table. So the table which contain row and column, we can define also the span. For example, if we have one row, the first row contains 2 cells, but the second row contains only 1 cell. Or if we are dealing with the row span, it means I would like to know if the column contains 2 cells or the column contains only 1 cell. So there are some merging of cells. So we want to merge. So the column span defines how many columns the cell occupies. And the row span defines how many rows the cell occupies. So these two attributes is important, especially when you have many data and you want to merge some of the cells. In this case, we can say we have the column span equals to 1. And the below part, we have the column span equal to 2. Because 2 cells are merged into 1. That's why we call it the column span equals to 2. Here the row span equals to 2. Because 2 rows, the first row and the second row, now it merges. So the row span 2 means we want to combine the 2 rows. Now let's see this example. Based on this example, you can figure out how we create table when some of the columns or some of the rows are merged. You can see the first cell and the column 1, the cell in the column 1 and the row number 2, and then the row number 3 and column 1. They have separate data. Then there is no issue. What about this? The cell 2, 2 is a merge between two rows. And what about the cell 2, 1? It is a merge. It is a merge from two columns. This is from the cell 2 and cell 3. In the code, you can check the cell spacing is 0. Okay, the cell spacing is only to make the table a little bit have some more space. Okay, but in this case 0, then we don't have any space. And then the tr class 1, I want to specify the row, and I define with the class. Maybe I will not discuss the class now, but you can see we can also define the class. And then the cell 1, it means this is the first data, and then we have the second data, which is cell 2, 1. What does it mean? When we create a table, we need to start from the table, and then we need to go to the row. After we have the row, we need to define how many cells that we want to create. So in one row, here, in the first row, how many cells do we have? We have only 2. But in fact, we have 1, 2, 3. In this case, we have only 2 cells because the column has been spanned into 2. So the column span 2. For this one, you can calculate. We have TD1, and then we have the TD, and the column span equals to 2. So in total is 1 plus 2. We have actually 3 columns. So the class number 2, I will not explain the class now. So here we have the cell 1, 2, and we have row span 2. So row, we have 2 rows, and then we combine into 1. In this case, we have the TD, which is 1 cell, and then the row we are going to span. But why do we need to address here? It is located in the row, and in the second row, and it is located in the second column. So our definition should be from the first row and then the next row, because the cell 2, 2 is in the second row. So we need to define the row span here. And then the cell 3, 2. The last one is to define the cell on the row number 3, and then we have only 1 TD. Why? We have only 1, 3, and then we have 2, 3. Because the additional row has been programmed with this statement. So I don't need another row for this row. Sorry, I don't need to have more additional TT, or I don't need to have additional tabular data in the third row, because I already defined here with the row span equals to 2. Okay, so this kind of table creation is very customized when you want to merge. So you need to understand where is the row span and where is the column span. And if you miss this column span and the row span, the table will not be in the tabular format. So sometimes, yeah, you need to figure out how we can make this kind of table. So this is the result. We have the, yeah, this is in the color. We have the first row, which is the cell 1,1, and the other cell is 2,1, which is a combination between the column 2 and column 3. And then we have the cell 1,2, and this cell is the merge between the row 2 and row 3. And we have this cell 3,2, and then 1,3 and 2,3. Okay. Yeah, in the real web, yeah, you can find more complex table. And this is only a very small example for a table. Next is about form. It is also important to manage form because the forms will be needed to get the data from the users. I will not explain many kind of forms, but maybe you can have some idea about this form. And when we enter the Django, you will know more how to create forms later. The forms are the primary method for gathering data. You want to get input from the data, then you can make forms. The forms is a kind of block form and then slash form. We do not have our server now, so the form will not be working well. I will only teach you how to create form, and maybe you can have some selection, and you can put like the text area and etc. However, we cannot do any action. The action should have the method. We will learn more about this one, and the action should go to one or other files or any Python file related to this action. So we will learn also on this part later. We can define the form and we can define the name of the form. And the method name is, yeah, a kind of statement, whether it is get or post, depending about your protocol to access the server. The action is an attribute to tell where the form data should be sent. So there are several kind of form fields, especially when we want to get the user input. The first is text. It is a single line text. So if you need to enter your name, because it is text. The type of text, yeah, it is a string or it can be also a number. And this is the name of the input, or this is the attribute name. And this is a value, or this is the original value, or this is the initial value before the user input the name. We can have multi-line text area. So we use the text area here, and we specify the name of the text area. In the text area, we can have many lines. If we use text, we have only single line. That's the difference. And we can define the hidden fields. The hidden fields is a data that is hidden in the HTML. When you open your web, you also cannot see the variable. It is only to connect between the server and the front end. Usually, some of the programmer will use these hidden fields. So the type is hidden, and then the name is account, and then there is a value. For example, this is a hidden text field. If you access to web with your ID and with your password, usually the ID will be indicated as hidden, and your password it will be indicated as another type. You can have the password, so the ID will not be published. We have field sets. Field set is a set of related form. For example, in this case, we have one field set, two field set. Okay, so this is the first, and this is the second. In the first field set, we are going to group the client data. In the second field set, we are going to group the order data. With this kind of field set, we can make the data more structured. So we know that this is the data belongs to client, and this is the data belongs to the product or the order. Sometimes, yeah, people want to see the header of this data, so we can use legend. So the legend is the field set title. So it is only to show what is the meaning by this field set. We can define another input controls. For example, checkbox. So in the checkbox, yeah, you can just check if it is true, or yeah, you can uncheck if it is false. You can define the name, and you can define the value, or this is the initial value. We have radio buttons. The radio button is a kind of selection. For example, I want the users to input whether I need to call Mr., Miss, Mrs., or Professor, Doctor, and etc. They have kind of salutation. So this is the original value, and if we ask them to select, okay, with the radio, we call this is radio button. And the radio buttons can be grouped. When we group the radio button, it allows only one to be selected in a group. Let's say now you are living in Yongin, for example, but your hometown is not Yongin. However, you need to fill in at least one address. So you will fill in the current address, so it is only one selection. Or maybe you want to include your current status, you need to get only one option. Or for example, gender, you can choose only one, you cannot choose two gender. So this kind of radio button, yeah, is very helpful for only one selection. We have the drop-down menus. The drop-down menus is a kind of selection. Maybe I can show these examples before I explain the details. Let's copy and paste this one. In the page 51, you can see there's one file, and it is 2 pages. There are 2 pages, so you can copy and paste. The first page is the page number 51, and the second page is the code in the page number 52. So you can put below the first page. Now I would like to save this one. Let's say I put this as form.html. Yeah, this is kind of form. This is the primitive form. If you check nowadays, there are many good forms. But for now, I would like to teach you the scratch of HTML for you to improve it later. Oh, okay. I think it's the time.